You don't contribute, so you don't deserve a plate, my aunt said at Christmas dinner. So I quietly paid the entire catering bill, took the receipt, and told everyone they could eat if they could afford to reimburse me. They froze. All right, so let me set the scene. Christmas dinner at my aunt's house is usually a big deal. I'm talking full-blown catered meal, big family gathering, fancy decorations, and everyone pretending to like each other for a few hours. Now, I'll admit, I'm not the most involved family member. I live a few hours away, I work a lot, and I don't have kids, so I don't really fit into the family's usual chaos. But I always show up with a gift, I help clean up, and I'm not a freeloader by any means. This year, I show up with a nice bottle of wine and a big box of fancy chocolates, planning to just enjoy the night like everyone else. I'm chatting with my cousin near the kitchen when I hear my aunt, loudly and on purpose, say to someone, "Well, she doesn't contribute, so I don't know why she thinks she deserves a plate." I blinked, thought I misheard. Nope, she was talking about me. Mind you, this meal was catered. She didn't cook anything herself. Everyone just Venmo'd her or pitched in cash ahead of time. I never got the memo, never even knew there was a cost. Apparently, she sent it through a family group chat I'm not in, so I just kind of stood there for a second, feeling my face get hot. Then I had an idea. I asked quietly to see the catering invoice, pretending to be curious, while I was on $180 for the whole meal. Okay. I stepped outside, got on the phone with the catering company, and paid it in full. Came back in with the printed receipt and, in front of everyone, I said, "Hey, just so you know, I covered the cost of dinner. If you'd like to eat, you can reimburse me directly." You could have heard a pin drop. Even the kids stopped moving. My aunt turned bright red. "You didn't have to do that," she muttered. I smiled and said, "Well, I didn't want to be a freeloader. But now that I've contributed, I guess I do deserve a plate." Some people laughed awkwardly. My cousin fist bumped me. A few people actually did pay me back on the spot. Most didn't. I didn't care. It wasn't about the money. It was about reminding them that just because I'm quiet and keep to myself doesn't mean I'll let someone disrespect me. Especially not over mashed potatoes and dry turkey. And you better believe I wasn't quiet about taking home leftovers. Let me back up a bit and give you some context about my family. We're what you might call comfortably middle class, with champagne taste. My Aunt Elaine, the one hosting Christmas dinner, married well. Her husband Richard comes from old money, not billionaire status or anything, but enough to afford a 5-bedroom house in a gated community and yearly trips to Europe. They have 2 kids, my cousins Brandon and Melissa, both in their late 20s. Now, the rest of the family consists of my mom, Elaine's younger sister, my dad, a high school physics teacher, my older brother Jake with his wife and their 3 kids, and my grandparents on my mom's side. Then there are a few of Richard's siblings and their families who also attend the annual Christmas dinner. I'm 32, single, and work as an architectural engineer for a firm about 3 hours away from my hometown. I moved away after college, and while I love my family, I've always been the black sheep. I don't call enough, don't visit enough, and according to Aunt Elaine, don't participate enough in family traditions. What she really means is that I don't bend to her will or seek her approval like everyone else does. The drive to my aunt's house that Christmas morning was unusually peaceful. Fresh snow had fallen the night before, blanketing the countryside in white. I had my favorite playlist going, a thermos of coffee in the cup holder, and was genuinely looking forward to seeing everyone, despite the usual family drama that inevitably unfolds. I'd spent nearly $200 on that bottle of wine, a 2015 Napa Valley Cabernet Sauvignon that I knew my Uncle Richard would appreciate, and another $75 on artisanal chocolates from a local chocolatier in my city. Not that I was counting, but I never showed up empty-handed to these gatherings. I arrived around 3 p.m., about an hour before dinner was scheduled to be served. The driveway was already full of cars, so I parked on the street. Walking up to the house with my gifts, I could see through the large bay windows that the living room was packed with people. Christmas music drifted out into the cold air, along with bursts of laughter and the shrieks of excited children. My entrance was met with the usual flurry of half-hearted hugs and, "Oh, you made it," comments, as if they were surprised I'd bothered to show up. I handed the wine to Uncle Richard, who genuinely appreciated it and gave the chocolates to Aunt Elaine, who took them with a tight smile and placed them on a side table without a word of thanks. "You look good," my mom said, giving me a real hug. "Work must be treating you well." "It is," I replied. "Just finished a big project last week, so I finally have some time off." "That's wonderful, honey. Have you met anyone special yet?" And there it was, the inevitable question about my love life. Before I could answer, my 7-year-old niece Lily came running up, saving me from the interrogation. "Aunt Jess, come, see the gingerbread house I made." I let her drag me away to the dining room, where several gingerbread houses were displayed on a side table. Hers was charmingly lopsided, covered in an excessive amount of candy and icing. "This is amazing, Lily. You're an architect in the making," I told her, which made her beam with pride. I spent the next half hour catching up with Jake and his wife Sarah, playing with their kids and chatting with my grandparents. Everyone seemed in good spirits, and I started to think that maybe this year would be different. Maybe we could get through a family gathering without any passive-aggressive comments or thinly veiled criticism. I was wrong. I was helping my cousin Melissa refill the ice bucket when I overheard Aunt Elaine in the kitchen. She was talking to Richard's sister, Patricia, not bothering to lower her voice. "Well, she doesn't contribute, so I don't know why she thinks she deserves a plate." The comment hit me like a slap. I froze, ice tongs in hand, and looked at Melissa, who had the decency to look embarrassed. "She's talking about me, isn't she?" I whispered. Melissa nodded slightly. "Mom sent out a group message last week asking everyone to chip in for the catering. I guess you didn't get it." "No, I didn't." I set down the ice bucket, my appetite suddenly gone. "Why wasn't I included in the message?" Melissa shrugged. "Mom has a separate group chat for immediate family, and another for extended family and events. You might be in the wrong one, or not in any at all, I thought. This wasn't the first time I'd been left out of family communications. Last year, I showed up on the wrong day for Easter brunch because no one had told me they'd changed the date. I excused myself and went to find my cousin Brandon, who had always been straight with me. I found him by the bar, mixing himself a drink. Hey, what's this about paying for dinner? I asked quietly. Brandon grimaced. Yeah, Mom decided to go with fancy catering this year instead of potluck. She asked everyone to chip in about $60 per person. Didn't you get the message? No, I said flatly. And I just overheard her telling Patricia that I don't contribute and don't deserve a plate. Brandon winced. That's harsh. Mom can be, well, you know how she is. Yes, I knew exactly how Aunt Elaine was. She'd always held me to a different standard than everyone else, always found ways to exclude me or make me feel less than. When I was a kid, she'd comment on my weight while praising her own children's athletic builds. In high school, she questioned my college choices while bragging about Brandon and Melissa's Ivy League acceptances. As an adult, she found new ways to belittle me, my career choices, my single status, my apartment in the city. Do you know who handled the payment to the catering company? I asked Brandon. Mom did. She collected from everyone and paid them directly. I nodded, a plan forming in my mind. Where's the catering staff now? In the kitchen. They're about to start. Serving? I thanked him and made my way to the kitchen. 3 catering staff members were arranging serving platters and checking chafing dishes. I approached the one who seemed to be in charge, a middle-aged woman with efficiently pulled back hair. Excuse me, I said with a friendly smile. Everything looks amazing. Are you the one in charge? Yes, I'm Diane, the catering manager, she replied professionally. Diane, I was wondering, has the bill been fully paid yet? She looked uncomfortable for a moment. Well, we received a partial payment as a deposit, but the remainder is due at the end of service today. Interesting. So Aunt Elaine had collected money from everyone, but hadn't fully paid the caterers yet. This was even better than I'd hoped. Could I see the invoice, please? I'd like to cover the remaining balance. Diane hesitated. Usually we deal directly with the client who booked us. I understand, but this is a family affair, and I'd like to contribute my share directly. My aunt is quite busy with the guests right now. She seemed to accept this explanation and pulled out a folder from her large tote bag. She showed me the invoice, $1,180 total, with a $500 deposit already paid, leaving $680 due. Actually, I said, I'd like to pay the entire amount, including the deposit. Can you refund my aunt's deposit and let me handle the full payment? Diane looked surprised but checked her tablet. We can do that since the final payment hasn't been processed yet, but are you sure? That's quite generous. I'm sure, I said, pulling out my credit card. Family is important to me, and I want to contribute. While Diane processed my payment, I asked her for a favor. Could I get a printed receipt showing that I've paid the full amount? She nodded and used a portable printer to provide me with a detailed receipt. As she handed it to me, I thanked her and asked one more question. When you serve dinner, could you wait for my signal before you begin? I'd like to make a small announcement. Diane agreed, probably assuming I wanted to make a heartfelt Christmas toast. With the receipt in hand, I took a moment in the hallway bathroom to collect myself. My heart was pounding, and I questioned if I was being petty. But then I remembered all the years of subtle exclusion, the digs at my life choices, and now this blatant statement that I didn't deserve to eat with my family because I hadn't contributed money to a fund I knew nothing about. No, I wasn't being petty. I was standing up for myself. I rejoined the party just as Aunt Elaine was calling everyone to gather for dinner. The catering staff had set up a beautiful buffet in the dining room, and family members were starting to line up, plates in hand. Diane caught my eye, and I nodded. She quickly stepped in front of the buffet. If I could have everyone's attention, please. Before we begin serving, there's a small announcement. All eyes turned to her, then to me as I stepped forward with the receipt in hand. I just wanted to let everyone know, I said in a clear voice that carried across the room, that I've taken care of the catering bill. The entire thing. I held up the receipt as evidence. If you'd like to eat, you can reimburse me directly. The silence that followed was deafening. My aunt's face went from confusion to shock to embarrassment in the space of seconds. Uncle Richard looked bewildered. My mother put a hand to her mouth. The children, sensing the tension but not understanding it, fidgeted uncomfortably. You paid for everything? Aunt Elaine finally stammered. Yes, I replied calmly. I heard you mention that I don't contribute and don't deserve a plate, so I thought I'd contribute in a meaningful way. My uncle stepped forward, reaching for his wallet. Jessica, that's very generous but unnecessary. We had already what? I interrupted. Already decided that I shouldn't be included in the family group chat where this was discussed. Already collected money from everyone except me, and then complained that I don't contribute? More uncomfortable silence. My cousin Brandon, bless him, broke the tension by walking up to me with his wallet out. Here's my share, he said, handing me $60. And thanks for covering this. The food looks amazing. His gesture seemed to unfreeze the room. Some family members awkwardly came forward with cash or opened their payment apps. Others hung back, looking uncertain. My aunt remained rooted to the spot, her face flushed with embarrassment or anger or both. My mom approached me, concern in her eyes. Jess, honey, I had no idea you weren't in the group chat. I assumed Elaine had told you directly. It's okay, Mom, I said loud enough for others to hear. I'm used to being the afterthought in this family, but I won't be the punching bag. Uncle Richard cleared his throat. Jessica is right. This was a communication error on our part, And her gesture, while dramatic, is generous. Let's all enjoy the meal she's provided and make this right. He turned to the catering staff. Please, serve the meal. And Jessica, he looked me in the eye. I apologize for this misunderstanding. I nodded, acknowledging his apology, though we both knew it wasn't just a misunderstanding. Slowly, awkwardly, people began filling their plates. The initial tension gradually eased as everyone sat down to eat. The food was excellent. Prime rib, glazed ham, scalloped potatoes, roasted vegetables, and an array of holiday sides. I made a point of filling my plate generously and enjoying every bite. Throughout dinner, I received a mix of reactions. Some family members avoided eye contact entirely. Others made a point of thanking me for the meal. My younger cousins thought the whole thing was hilarious. They'd never seen their parents so uncomfortable. My grandmother squeezed my hand and whispered, "Good for you, standing up for yourself." Aunt Elaine, however, barely touched her food and said little throughout the meal. I caught her glaring at me several times when she thought I wasn't looking. By the time dessert was served, a selection of pies and a chocolate Yule log, about half the family had reimbursed me their share. I hadn't expected full repayment and was surprised by how many actually paid up. But as I'd told myself earlier, it wasn't about the money. After dinner, as everyone moved back to the living room for gift exchanges, my aunt cornered me in the hallway. "That was completely unnecessary and embarrassing," she hissed. "You made a scene at Christmas dinner." I met her gaze steadily. No, what was unnecessary was excluding me from information and then criticizing me for not knowing about it. What was embarrassing was you talking about me like I'm some freeloader when I've never once shown up empty-handed to any family gathering. "You don't understand the pressure of hosting these events," she said. "You swoop in for a few hours, bring a token gift, and leave. I coordinate everything, year after year." "By choice," I pointed out. "No one forced you to host, and if it's such a burden, why not let someone else take a turn? Or make it truly potluck style?" She pressed her lips into a thin line. "You've always been difficult, Jessica, ever since you were a child. Difficult means I don't bend to your arbitrary rules or seek your approval like everyone else does. I'm fine with being difficult." We stared at each other for a long moment, before her husband appeared at her side. "Everything all right?" Richard asked, looking between us. "Fine," Aunt Elaine said tersely, before turning and walking away. Richard lingered. "That was quite a statement you made tonight," he said, but without judgment in his tone. "It felt necessary," I replied. He nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes necessary statements are uncomfortable. For what it's worth, I think Elaine was out of line, and I apologize that you weren't properly included in the planning." His words surprised me. Uncle Richard usually stayed out of family drama, preferring to let his wife handle social matters while he focused on business and golf. "Thank you," I said simply. "Just try to remember it's Christmas," he added before following his wife. The gift exchange that followed was strained but proceeded without further incident. I'd bought thoughtful presents for everyone. Books for my bookworm nieces and nephews, a nice scarf for my mom, specialty coffee for my dad, and so on. Aunt Elaine had gotten me a generic bath set that still had the clearance sticker partially visible on the bottom, her usual passive-aggressive gift-giving style. As the evening wore on and people began to leave, I noticed my cousin Melissa approaching with a container of leftovers. "Mom said to ask if you want to take some food home," she said, a hint of amusement in her eyes. "I absolutely do," I replied. After all, I paid for it. Together, we went to the kitchen where the catering staff had packed up the remaining food. I filled a large container with choice cuts of prime rib, plenty of sides, and 2 generous slices of chocolate Yule log. "That was badass what you did," Melissa said quietly as we packed the food. "Mom needed to be called out. You think so?" I hadn't expected support from Melissa, who usually sided with her mother. She nodded. "She's been extra controlling this year. Did you know she made Brandon and his girlfriend sit at the kids' table last Christmas because they weren't married yet?" I hadn't known that, but it sounded exactly like something Aunt Elaine would do. "How are things with you?" I asked, realizing I hadn't had a chance to really talk with Melissa all evening. She sighed. "Okay, I guess. Mom's pressuring me to quit my job and move back home until I find a suitable husband, like it's 1950 or something." "That's ridiculous," I said. "You love your job." Melissa worked as a graphic designer for an advertising agency in Chicago. "I do. But according to Mom, it's not a stable career path, and I should be focusing on finding a man who can provide for me." She rolled her eyes. "Your stunt tonight probably set me back months in the independence department, or maybe it showed her that she can't control everyone," I suggested. Melissa considered this. "Maybe. Anyway, we should get together sometime. Without all this." She gestured vaguely around the kitchen. "I'd like that," I said, and meant it. We exchanged phone numbers, realizing we didn't even have each other's current contact information, and promised to meet up in the new year. As I was preparing to leave, saying goodbyes and collecting my coat, my brother Jake pulled me aside. "That was quite a power move," he said, half smiling. "Not what I was going for, but I guess it worked out that way," I replied. "Aunt Elaine's been talking crap about you for years," he said bluntly. "Sarah and I have called her on it before, but she always has some excuse." I was surprised to hear this. "I didn't know you defended me." Jake looked uncomfortable. "Maybe not enough. It's just easier sometimes to let her rant and change the subject." I should have said more. "It's okay," I assured him. "Family dynamics are complicated." "Still," he said, "what you did tonight was justified and hilarious. Sarah's been texting her sisters about it already." Great, I thought. By tomorrow, I'd be the talk of extended family gossip circles. But maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. My parents walked me to my car. Dad gave me a quick hug, muttering, Love you, kiddo, before retreating to give Mom and me a moment alone. Was I out of line? I asked her once Dad was out of earshot. Mom considered for a moment. It was dramatic, but not unwarranted. Elaine has always been hard on you, and I've probably enabled it by not stepping in more. Why is she like that with me specifically? Mom leaned against my car, looking up at the night sky. You remind her of me when I was young. Before I met your father and settled down, as she calls it. I had dreams of traveling, having a career. Elaine always took the conventional route. Marriage right after college, children right after marriage. I think she resents that you're living the life I once wanted. This was more insight than my mother had ever shared about her relationship with her sister. That's not your fault or mine, I said. No, it's not, she agreed. But family baggage rarely makes logical sense. She hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself. Just maybe give it some time before the next family gathering. I laughed. That was already my plan. The drive home that night was quiet. The roads nearly empty on Christmas evening. I replayed the events of the day in my mind, questioning whether I had overreacted. But each time I recalled my aunt's dismissive words, she doesn't contribute, so she doesn't deserve a plate, I felt justified in my response. By the time I arrived home, it was nearly midnight. My apartment felt peaceful after the chaos of the day. I put the leftovers in the fridge, poured myself a glass of wine, and curled up on the couch to decompress. My phone buzzed with a text from Brandon. Legendary move tonight. Mom's still fuming, but Dad thought it was brilliant. He's never seen anyone stand up to her like that. I smiled and replied, not sure if I'll be invited next year. His response came quickly. Are you kidding? Mom will definitely invite you, if only to try to regain the upper hand. But now she knows you won't be pushed around. Perhaps he was right. Family relationships are complex, built on years of interactions, misunderstandings, and deep-seated patterns. One dramatic Christmas dinner wouldn't solve everything, but it had shifted something fundamental in how I was perceived and how I perceived myself within the family dynamic. I had advocated for myself, refused to be disrespected, and in doing so possibly opened the door to more authentic relationships with relatives like Melissa and Brandon, who seemed to appreciate someone challenging the status quo. As I drifted off to sleep that night, I felt lighter somehow. I had stood my ground, and while it might make future family gatherings awkward for a while, I knew I wouldn't go back to being the quiet family member who accepted mistreatment silently. The next morning, I woke to several more texts from family members, some supportive, some clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. My grandmother had sent a particularly sweet message. Your grandfather and I were so proud of you last night. Elaine needed to hear that. Love you, sweetheart. Even more surprising was a message from Uncle Richard. Jessica, I want to reimburse you for the catering. Please send me your payment details. Also, I've added you to the family group chat. You should have received an invitation. I checked, and sure enough, there was an invitation to join Palmer Family Events on my messaging app. Progress, I supposed. The final message came a few days later, from Aunt Elaine herself. The caterers said you were very professional and generous, with gratuity. Thank you for that. We should talk before the next family gathering. It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement, which was more than I had expected. As for the leftover prime rib, it made excellent sandwiches for days afterward. I savored every bite, remembering the looks on everyone's faces when I announced I had paid for the entire meal. Sometimes, standing up for yourself comes with unexpected benefits, like the best Christmas leftovers I'd ever had. And if anyone ever again suggests I don't deserve a plate at the family table, well, they now know I'm perfectly capable of buying the whole damn table.